You awaken before the factory whistles pierce the silence, your heartbeat resonating through desolate corridors where labor once sang like strings strummed under the dawn's embrace. You straighten your suit, feigning indifference to the constriction at your seams, clinging to the illusion that dignity can still draw breath as unseen hands stealthily shorten the very thread that binds you. Outside, your neighbors lean on you for support, and while you nod in acknowledgement, you conceal the tremors that rattle your knees beneath polished boots. You tally promises like weary coins in a pocket worn thin, feeling each comforting warmth slip away, one after another, into the consuming darkness beneath you. The trains continue their relentless journeys, yet their cries sound more like weary sighs, dragging your name across the vast landscape like an anchor tethered to your very soul. You keep your lights ablaze into the night, poring over ledgers resembling ancient tomes, hoping that piety can transform cold digits into the grace of deliverance. Each contract reaches for you like a glass of water presented with a feigned smile, yet its taste is tainted with a metallic aftertaste, reminiscent of a key left too long upon your tongue. Your oldest machines gaze back like devoted ancestors, rusted yet steadfast, questioning why you have ceased nourishing them when your focus has shifted to feeding faceless strangers. You reassure yourself it is merely a passing season of hardship, yet the calendar upon the wall bleeds ink, day by day, a slow but undeniable erosion. Within the boardrooms, your voice maintains a veneer of calm, though each utterance demands more air, and with every confident nod, the atmosphere thins, suffocating. The street lamps flicker like weary eyelids, and you sense the city observing you, much like children note the lapses of a parent forgetting their own special day. Your savings, once a deep and flowing river, have transmuted into a shallow canal. You tread carefully, afraid to reveal the stones lurking beneath the surface. You extend your hand to distant guests, their smiles unnaturally easy, and you detect the lingering warmth of their touch, measuring your pulse for signs of faltering resolve. When you speak of resilience, the taste of dust coats your tongue, as if the very words crumble one by one, syllable by syllable, eroding behind your teeth. You hear murmurs from distant capitals, not spiteful, but merely pragmatic, akin to surgeons deliberating the optimal incision before the wound festers further. Your friends raise glasses in your honor at dinners, yet the clink sounds like harbingers of warning, and laughter arrives tardily, resembling a delayed train's approach. You begin to eschew mirrors, for the reflection staring back resembles a borrowed visage, as if someone else has donned your expression to reclaim what you owe. At night, papers accumulate upon your chest, soft as feathers yet heavy as boulders, pressing down until even sleep becomes a contentious negotiation. The continent recalibrates your existence in hushed speculation, questioning how long it can depend on a pillar that has begun to yield. And when that first minuscule crack reverberates within you, it's neither explosive nor dramatic, just a muted snap, like a thread severing in the shadows. You rise anew, the morning feeling choreographed, akin to a performance executed for vacant seats, while your shadow arrives late, dragging its reluctant feet. In the papers, your likeness appears unwavering, but the ink encircling your eyes has darkened, as if someone has delicately infused exhaustion into your portrait. You open your vault to discover it colder than your mind can recall. A frigid cellar where echoes answer first, and certainty lingers at the rear. The bridges you have constructed still stand, yet each bolt feels like a loan, and beneath the rush of traffic, you perceive a faint ticking, as if time is accruing interest in secrecy. Your factories hum, yet the sound has thinned, resembling an elderly man whistling to mask his fear of the encroaching silence. You continue signing agreements that smile as radiantly as wedding vows, while their rings tighten progressively, transforming affection into a shackle you cannot escape. At night, you discern the salt upon your lips without tears, as though the sea clandestinely swells within you, drop by patient drop. Your workers gaze at you with unwavering loyalty, and you feel the guilt of a lighthouse whose light is dimming, still vowing safe passage to ships adrift. You attempt to patch the roof with delicate repairs, but the rain now arrives sideways, infiltrating every seam you were oblivious to before. In hushed chambers, advisors whisper, akin to funeral directors honing the art of kindness, and you nod too quickly, dreading that your silence might reveal a confession. You start to notice the gradual silence of phones, not abruptly, but rather with one less call each week, similar to how birds depart before the onset of winter's chill. The streets remain tidy, yet an oppressive veil lingers over everything, a muted sheen of anticipation, as if the city is holding its breath in your presence. You gaze east and west, encountering open palms, but behind each hand lies a hidden ledger, tallying your doubts as if they were collateral. Your pride, once a shield, now feels like damp wool, heavy and acrid, sticking to you, while you feign that it still offers protection. You enter a meeting, sensing eyes appraising you, reminiscent of an appraiser inspecting a house, probing surfaces, eager to find the hollowness hidden beneath your words. When you laugh, the sound emerges polished, yet fails to resonate in your chest, exposing the void where joy once resided comfortably. You tell yourself that control is a habitual practice, yet your hands tremble over signatures, for the pen now feels more like a needle than a mere tool. The continent's climate grows colder, and you realize the chill is not an external force, but a deep-seated frost within your chest, where warmth used to thrive. You observe your neighbors recalibrate their plans around you, gently and discreetly, like friends rearranging furniture to accommodate an impending fall. And amidst the silence between news stories, you perceive it clearly now, the faint sound of a lock turning, as though someone else has discovered your key. You awaken to headlines that carry a weight greater than yesterday's, not sharper, merely denser, reminiscent of fog that lingers stubbornly even when the sun attempts to break through. Your mornings morph into rituals of reassurance, with hands steadying cups, breaths meticulously counted, as if tranquility itself now demands vigilant oversight. You stroll past monuments engineered to endure for centuries, and for the first time, you sense them inclining toward you, attuned to your vulnerabilities. The equilibrium you once possessed now resembles a precarious stance on ice that softly sings beneath your feet, warning you without ever shattering outright. You promise those who rely on you that you will exercise patience, yet patience has begun to feel like hunger, only repackaged with a kinder label. In the hushed corridors, you detect footsteps mirroring yours, never overtaking or lagging behind, just close enough to remind you that you are being observed. Your currency of trust, once effortlessly exchanged, now circulates hesitantly, passed from hand to hand with elongated pauses and strained smiles. You notice how frequently you find yourself repeating phrases, as if uttering them twice might anchor them, conjuring belief through sheer insistence. The future you envisioned now feels more distant, not obliterated, merely pushed back like furniture piled before a door you hope will not be breached. You participate in ceremonies designed to showcase confidence, yet the applause resonates mutedly, as if muffled by gloves. Your industries still stand, but they resemble actors lingering after the final curtain call, awaiting directions that never seem to arrive. You feel diminished in spaces where you once established the tone, your presence now gauged by what you can provide rather than who you are. Each concession you make feels fleeting in the moment, yet haunts you by morning, solidifying into permanence. You reassure yourself that control follows cycles, though this one feels like a tide that has learned your patterns. The burden of obligation settles into your stance, subtly bending you, enough that others begin to notice the shift in your posture. You hear sympathy where there was once admiration, and the distinction strikes harder than any overt criticism could. Your nights stretch longer, ensnared in a half-sleep, where fleeting solutions materialize only to dissipate before you can grasp them. You begin to envy silence, for even troubling news at least affirms that you remain a subject of attention. Surrounding you, alliances discreetly adjust, like sailors trimming their sails before acknowledging that the wind has indeed shifted. And somewhere beneath the layers of routine and determination, you sense momentum slipping away slowly enough to avoid panic, yet just enough to instill fear. You start to gauge each day by the reassurance it demands, observing how effort supplants ease in even the most trivial choices you face. Your hallways stretch endlessly now, every stride an assessment of memories, each step questioning if it propels you forward or merely loops around your own despair. You revisit old speeches and scarcely recognize the assuredness, as if reading the words of a person who had faith in the ground beneath them. The promises made long ago surface like specters, polite yet insistent, lingering at doorways that remain ajar despite your attempts to close them. You feel the tension of remaining still while others shift, as though the act of simply holding your ground has morphed into a contest of defiance. The tools you once depended upon seem dull in your grasp, their familiar heft, a source of comfort that yields no real outcome. You perceive a growing impatience surrounding you, subtle as rising humidity, thickening the atmosphere without a single complaint uttered. Your calendar swells with meetings that lead nowhere, yet the thought of canceling them feels like an admission of absence rather than a demonstration of authority. You find yourself envying those who are decisive, even if recklessly so, as doubt now appears to be a luxury you can no longer afford. The words you select become cautious and rounded, polished to avoid inflicting pain on anyone, including yourself. You recognize how frequently you apologize, not for missteps, but for the time, space, and expectations that you can no longer fulfill. Your posture straightens out of reflex, though the muscles beneath bear the ache of a burden never meant to be enduring. You observe others adapting swiftly, shedding weight, altering course, while you remain tethered by the contours you once mastered. The notion of relief has grown abstract, akin to a location mapped out in ways you can no longer trust. You sense that patience directed at you is becoming conditional, quietly weighed against unspoken alternatives. Your nights become an unending procession of lists, each item simply replaced by two more before dawn arrives. You convince yourself that endurance equates to strength, even as it gradually erases the memory of any real momentum. The future condenses into a narrow corridor rather than an expansive field, its walls converging tighter with each concession. You recognize that you no longer direct events. Instead, you adjust your balance as they sweep past you. And within this realization, a hint of mourning emerges, not for collapse, but for the control that has already slipped away. You detect the silence that now follows your declarations, not disagreement, merely a stillness where confidence once resonated without hesitation. Your days become dominated by maintenance rather than ambition, akin to buffing old brass as the engine beneath it cools. You start to feel managed by your own routines, ensnared by habits that once liberated you but now silently dictate your actions. The language enveloping you grows softer, concern replacing expectation, as though others are gently preparing you for lesser roles. You observe opportunities pass like trains you once helped schedule, yet no longer bored, resigned to the act of watching them depart. Your focus drifts from creation to containment, from expanding outward to preventing collapse inward. Even victories arrive with a muted echo, wearing explanations that make them sound fleeting before they even take root. You sense a distant relief when you step away, subtle yet unmistakable, reminiscent of a room exhaling once the tension dissipates. The structures you depend on remain intact, yet they creak more audibly now, protesting under the weight of your indecision. You rehearse reassurance in front of mirrors, modulating tone and posture, practicing steadiness as actors prepare to portray grief. The true cost of procrastination becomes apparent, even as you convince yourself that postponement is still a viable choice rather than an eroding path. You perceive your influence diminishing, stretched thin across obligations until it loses all warmth and form. In your discussions of the future, your words grow sparse, reduced to promises that withstand examination. You come to understand that momentum has shifted elsewhere, neither stolen nor lost, but drawn away by a quieter, more assured presence. Your advisors now propose contingencies before visions, safety nets taking precedence over blueprints. You become wary of whom you share your uncertainties with, learning that vulnerability travels faster than trust can. Your strength transforms into mere endurance, respected in whispers yet no longer followed. You perceive history shifting your role, no longer a leader in motion, but more of a reference point around which others pivot. The present feels stagnant, a still pond where calm exists on the surface, while an undercurrent slowly drains beneath your feet. You come to realize that decline seldom heralds its arrival. It merely invites you to remain standing as it rearranges everything you know. You awaken with the sensation of being observed by time itself, as though the clock no longer tracks you but waits patiently for your misstep. Your mornings lose their urgency, replaced by cautious pacing, akin to navigating a room where glass is shattered but yet to fall. You start to identify the sound of avoidance creeping into polite conversations, pauses where commitment once thrived comfortably. The systems you once relied upon now feel like makeshift supports, steady enough to stand upon but unstable enough to discourage climbing. You notice how frequently you're asked to reassure others about your state rather than the promising future you once envisioned. Your sense of direction dulls, continually needing readjustment, as if the very notion of north has begun to shift. You observe younger forces racing ahead, lighter and unburdened by the weight of the reputation you still carry. Your past achievements feel historical now, referenced with respect, but rarely paving the way for new expectations. You sense that trust has not dissipated, merely repriced, offered cautiously and withdrawn without clear warning. You conduct meetings to maintain collective alignment, though this alignment increasingly resembles a compromise with gravity. The strain manifests in subtle ways: delayed responses, weakened commitments, expressions arriving half-formed. You begin to streamline your language, hoping that clarity can serve as a substitute for the confidence that no longer flows easily. The ground beneath your certainty feels sponge-like, absorbing pressure without ever pushing back against it. You feel your leverage dissolving into a sea of obligation, each favor owed now a burden, reminiscent of an unpaid visit. Your patience is publicly applauded, while privately it's gauged against alternatives quietly emerging nearby. You sense others are learning to function without your rhythm, adjusting their steps to a different tempo altogether. Your nights are filled with dreams of contingency, scenarios in which mere survival replaces ambition as the ultimate goal. You begin to see how dependency masquerades as partnership, appearing friendly until challenged by need. The concept of leadership contracts, defined less by guidance and more by the ability to endure under scrutiny. And gradually, unmistakably, you perceive your relevance thinning, not vanishing outright, just spreading too wide to maintain solid ground. You feel the atmosphere shift just before you step inside, chairs rearranged, hopes subtly diminished to prevent abrupt disillusionment. Your name still possesses significance, though it falls now with an ease that resembles a beloved novel being placed back on a shelf after being read. Instead of seeking advancement, you find yourself protecting the form of stability, clinging to what is left, rather than dreaming of what could rise. The agreements you once viewed as solid now appear fragile, sustained more by politeness and reminiscence than by pressing necessity. You cannot ignore how often comfort flows toward you, rather than from your own lips, reversing the current you once navigated with authority. Your calendar reveals deliberate spaces, emptiness crafted for the chance you might stumble, rather than time set aside for your ascent. You listen intently for any spark of enthusiasm and are met mostly with subdued acceptance, a quieter sound that demands less and pledges little in return. Your assurance draws strength from the past, bolstered by who you once were, without the same fortification by the person you are in the process of becoming. You detect a gentle retreat from those who once stood close, allies now taking a half step back while insisting everything remains unchanged. The rituals of leadership persist, yet they now seem ceremonial, actions preserved beyond their critical time, echoed from days more urgent. You observe how problems are reinterpreted into smaller frameworks before reaching you, softened to prevent straining your capacities. Your influence arrives in conversations like an afterthought, consulted only after paths have begun to form beneath the weight of collaboration. You become adept at offering reassurance, skillfully soothing spaces without altering their course. The energy you once exuded now reflects off those nearby, absorbed from others who stand in closer proximity to the progressive flow. You perceive decisions materializing beyond your confines, not in opposition to you, simply unfolding without your involvement. Your patience remains admired, yet now it feels more like acquiescence than steadfast determination. You gradually acknowledge decline as a new normal, interwoven into daily schedules and established rituals until it loses its significance. The future changes its approach. It no longer seeks your vision, but instead requests your approval. You maintain your footing, yet this stability no longer provides a clear sense of direction. Without fanfare, the essence of leadership subtly shifts from your grasp to the surrounding environment. You awaken to decisions that have quietly crystallized overnight, not concealed, merely settled before the dawn reaches the space you inhabit. Your presence continues to bear weight, but it now merely polishes the contours of outcomes already in motion, lacking the ability to shape their paths. You feel consulted as one might inquire about the weather, acknowledged, respected, yet ultimately considered only in passing. The framework of influence subtly rearranges, pathways diverted, doors now swinging open elsewhere, while yours remain discreetly shut. You find relief when responsibility passes you by, quickly accompanied by the guilt of feeling such a thing, questioning your own emotions. Your words now carry diminished urgency, settling softly rather than slicing through the din, as they once did. You notice how often gratitude is offered for your understanding rather than for your guidance. The past emerges as your most compelling credential, reiterated so frequently that it begins to echo like an apology. You observe initiatives unfolding without your mark, executed with precision and clarity, as if your absence had been part of the original intent. Your caution is lauded as wisdom, even when it costs you the power to make your own choices. You begin to perceive yourself as a stabilizing force imperative yet unseen, acknowledged only in your absence. The urgency that once drew others toward you now propels them past you, leaving you behind. You discern a shift in confidence, not seized but simply redirected by the inherent momentum. Your role diminishes into moderation, focused less on guiding and more on curbing extremes. You find yourself present at the moments of conclusion rather than initiation, authorizing endings rather than beginnings. The room engages in polite listening before swiftly moving on, conversations resuming at a different register. You come to understand that authority seldom dissolves. It transitions, subtly enough to seem voluntary. Your sense of identity loosens its grip on power, drifting toward recollection and established routines. You maintain your composure because it is the last remnant fully under your influence. With this measured restraint, you realize that the collapse is not a fall, it is a settling. You cease to declare your intentions, instead recognizing the outcomes, adjusting your demeanor to align with conclusions already reached elsewhere. Your days grow quieter, not tranquil, but orchestrated, like machinery idling to sidestep public failure. You feel entrusted with restraint rather than initiative, commended for preventing disasters instead of fostering improvements. The signs surrounding you retain their allure, yet they begin to feel performative, relics sustained after the narrative has moved forward. You start to realize how seldom urgency reaches you untouched, filtered through layers meant to shield you from stress. Your consent becomes a formality, sought to validate choices instead of influencing them. You observe other forms of confidence solidifying into routine, while yours softens into trepidation. The space you inhabit gradually constricts, offices shrink, speaking opportunities diminish, attention wavering sooner. You acquire the skill of deciphering silence accurately, aware of when it indicates agreement and when it denotes disregard. Your objections, whenever they arise, emerge too late, courteous, and easily absorbed, their impact minimal. You find yourself becoming a constant presence rather than a force, stable enough to rely upon, yet inadequate to lead. The narrative enveloping you falls into a comforting rhythm, asserting that continuity itself equates to success. You comprehend how stability can evolve into an excuse, maintaining form while sapping meaning. Your influence now drifts through memory rather than momentum, referenced more frequently than actively sought. You remain stationed at thresholds, opening doors you do not intend to cross. As others accelerate in their urgency, you find yourself stepping aside to prevent a collision. You embrace reduction as a form of responsibility, persuading yourself that having less can still suffice. The future takes shape without friction, precisely because you no longer resist its course. You stand intact, composed, and quietly sidelined, a pillar cherished from afar. And in that profound stillness, you grasp the true peril is not collapse but normalization. You awaken without any sense of urgency, aware that nothing necessitates your immediate concern. That emptiness weighs upon you more heavily than any crisis ever did. Your mornings unfold like a ritual, movements repeated for the sake of maintaining semblance rather than true necessity, akin to flags hoisted after the crowd has long dispersed. You observe how effortlessly the systems around you now operate, flowing smoother without friction, quieter, devoid of negotiation. Your very presence reassures those nearby that nothing theatrical is occurring, even as importance gradually slips away from you. You become a symbol of steadiness rather than guidance, a placid facade concealing the minimal choices you are asked to make. The mechanisms you once propelled now guide you gently, selecting pace and destination without ever consulting your desires. You find yourself listening more than speaking, and when you do utter words, they land softly, not disturbing the currents below them. The urgency to correct has dissipated, replaced by a management of perception, ensuring that decline never quite resembles failure. You come to realize how comfort can morph into a sort of containment, soft boundaries supplanting the necessity of force. Your influence wanes not through opposition, but through accommodation too readily extended to refuse. You linger in crucial moments, captured in photographs, recorded, preserved, while momentum unfurls in a different sphere. The future ceases to test your resolve, content in the knowledge that you will not disturb its trajectory. You feel how dependency has shifted quietly, with others no longer relying on you, but rather you leaning upon established structures. Your strength assumes a ceremonial quality, honored for what it once embodied, rather than for what it might still accomplish. You come to the realization that collapse did not manifest as chaos, but as order gradually reorganized without you in the forefront. The silence surrounding you no longer holds a transitory essence, but has settled like dust after a storm has passed. You grasp now that power seldom shatters. It migrates toward momentum, leaving tranquility in its wake. You remain entire, poised, and diminished, a presence recognized yet no longer deemed necessary. The danger crystallizes with unsettling clarity, not in catastrophe, not in turmoil, but in the acceptance that nothing must alter. And within that final insight, you comprehend that the true threat lies not in the collapse itself, but in how quietly it has woven itself into the fabric of normalcy,